Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a spectacular expert guest, Peggy Bailey, who is with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And we are so excited to have Peggy with us today. Welcome, Peggy.
Hi, thanks, Kristen, for having me here.
I'm so excited that you're here. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is just such a spectacular organization and does such a good job explaining what's happening with our nation's budget. People have likely been looking at the headlines and going, oh no, what is happening? Seeing big cuts to Medicaid, for example, proposed by Republican leadership. What is happening in our national budget right now?
Well, thanks for asking. I feel like I should make a t-shirt out of that because that's going to be a theme for the whole year. What is happening? So, what's most recently happening is the House has gone through a chaotic process of creating a budget reconciliation bill. That bill cuts Medicaid, it cuts food assistance, it fails to extend the child tax credit to about 17 million kids, and it does all of that in service of giving tax cuts to wealthy people and wealthy corporations. So it clearly outlines the priorities of the House of Representatives and many of the Republicans in Congress, and it will harm so many people. And like I said, all for the purpose of giving tax cuts to wealthy people.
And it is one of the most ridiculous, economically harmful, cost of living increase, damaging to our health bills I personally have ever seen. And I've been working in politics for maybe 923,000 years. It feels that way. It feels like it might have been 923,000 years since January 1 of this year, in fact. But, and this bill, though, it does a couple things. And you were talking about it in terms of showing the nation who Republican leadership is and what they stand for. And what they stand for, as you just said, is increased tax breaks for people who are very wealthy, like Donald Trump's billionaire friends, like Elon Musk, that will be paid for by cuts to things like Medicaid, which more than 72 million people rely on Medicaid for their health care. More than 40% of births, more than 60% of nursing home stays, 1 in 3 people with disabilities. I mean, the economic hit from pulling out healthcare from tens of millions of people is so big. It's so big. It's fiscally unresponsible. And also, what a lot of people don't realize is Medicaid keeps the doors of rural hospitals and hospitals of all sizes open for anyone who's having a health emergency. So, would you say, from your perspective, that this economic budget package, the bad budget package, is harmful to our economy as a whole?
Absolutely. And it's not only harmful to the economy as a whole because it's going to increase the federal debt, again, only in service of trying to give the most wealthy people a tax break. But it's gonna hurt people at their kitchen tables. You take the SNAP benefits, for example. So SNAP, food stamps, those are being proposed to be cut. Uh, One of the ways that they're going to cut those benefits is by requiring families to prove that they're working if they have kids over 7. So kids under 7 must be fine, but kids over 7, it's okay to threaten their ability to eat. That's completely unfair. It's unfair to the moms and dads that are trying to just raise their families, work every day, and expect the federal government to be able to help them out. But instead, this bill is going to create barriers. We know that when programs require work, it's not about requiring work. Most people who can work do work when they're getting federal assistance. It's about helping their families be able to close that income gap between what their bosses pay them and the ability to actually afford basic needs. And adding these work requirements really just creates another barrier because now it's another piece of paper, another log onto the computer to try to prove benefits, another challenge if you did that wrong. Now you've got to go and figure out how to do that paperwork correctly. It's all about creating barriers and making it harder for families when we really should be making it easier for families. So it's not only going to harm the economy, increase the debt, it's going to harm families where they live. And that is just completely unexplainable. I just don't understand when they've made promises to making things better for families when they're so obviously actually making it worse.
You raise an important point. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump said and promised, I will lower costs for families. The exact opposite is happening, people. Costs for families are going up. And at the same time as costs for families are going up, in part due to Trump's terrible tariffs tantrum, we are experiencing the programs that allow people to go to work, that allow people to raise their kids and thrive, and allow people to contribute to their communities, like SNAP and Medicaid. We're seeing Republicans cut those out entirely. So we have two things happening that are really disastrous. Costs are rising because of Trump's policies, and also the programs that allow people to build good lives are being cut by Donald Trump and Republicans. So it's a double whammy of doom. Now, I want to go back into SNAP because I think this is really important. There's a whole bunch of really important things to unpack. First of all, SNAP. Sometimes people are like, oh, it's a handout. Not really a handout. Not at all, actually. And in fact, SNAP is a huge economic booster to our economy. For every $1 in that we put in for SNAP, we get back $1.79 later because that money is immediately spent in our economy, and our economy is fueled by consumer spending right now. And whereas if you give a billionaire a tax break, that money usually, according to studies, does not go back into the economy to fuel it. It gets locked up in some savings account someplace out of the economy, so it does not become an engine for our economic success. So we have like this really interesting side-by-side comparison of which policies actually boost our economy and which don't. And again, listeners, billionaires getting tax breaks sucks the fuel out of our economy, whereas programs like SNAP and Medicaid and the CTC and childcare, those programs are proven to boost our economy and to allow people to go to work, to take care of their kids, and to contribute to their communities. And yet we also have this really weird word coding coming out of the Republican leadership about work criteria. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Peggy, because this is really important to listeners too. Some states have tried work requirements, like quote work requirements, and it ended up costing more to the states and more in the programs and more to taxpayers because it turns out, as Peggy said, there is not a lot of people trying to game the system. Most people are already working, right? And also, if you are unable to work, there's usually a reason. And so when we're talking about work, 3 out of 4 families need the wages of moms to make ends meet, and the majority of moms are in the labor force. So what is this work requirement weird coding coming from, or where is it coming from? What's happening with that?
Well, it's coming from a place of trying to put people in categories of who deserves help and who doesn't deserve help. And this is a false equivalency to make. Everyone needs to be able to eat. Everyone deserves the ability to access health coverage. And that is something that the wealthiest country in the world should be able to provide for the people who are here. One of the one of the ways that we can see how they're using this false narrative is they're doing a lot to demonize people who are immigrating to this country. And they're trying to wrap up that around people who are documented and undocumented. But in this bill that's passed the House, it's only documented people who are eligible for programs, people who are documented in some way, who we know are here, that are eligible for these programs. Yet they're cutting the benefit access to those very families and cloaking it in the veil of trying to demonize them as other when they are a part of who we are as the United States. It's what makes us stronger is the fact that we are so diverse and that we invite people into this country to help make us stronger. But this bill that is another way that this bill is otherizing people and demonizing people and trying to say that one person is more deserving of food than another person. And that's where the work requirements piece is also coming from. It's trying to say, and it's just unacceptable. It's not the case. All they're doing instead is making it harder for people who are working the hardest to be able to get the help that they need.
100%. And I'm glad you raised what's happening with immigration. In this bill, also, we see a tremendous amount of money going toward mass human rights abuses without due process. And they're wanting to pay for, by they, I mean Donald Trump and Republican leadership. I want to name names here. They want to pay for that through cutting Medicaid, SNAP, childcare, and more. That just hurts us all. It hurts our economy, it hurts our families, it hurts our communities, it hurts our hearts. I mean, it is really a ridiculously very bad, awful bill. And now it's moving to the US Senate. So the House has shown us who they are. You know, there's that old quote from Maya Angelou: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Okay? People, the US House has shown us who they are. They are wanting to give tax breaks and lots of our tax dollars, frankly, to billionaires who are already very wealthy. And they're wanting to pay for those tax breaks to billionaires with cuts to the programs that altogether we have all said as voters that we think are important. They're tools for success. Medicaid, SNAP, Head Start, the CTC, and more. And so now it moves to the Senate. And what do you think is going to happen in the Senate?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball so that I could that I would know, or that I had superpowers so I could make the Senate just kill this bill. But sadly, I have neither. So this is the best guess of how things are going to go. The thing that we do know is that there are some pieces of this bill that will naturally fall away in the Senate. And that's because this is a budget reconciliation bill. It is a budget reconciliation bill because those are the bills that only require 50 votes in the Senate. They only require 50 votes in the Senate because they only address spending issues. There are rules we call Byrd rules. They're named after Senator Byrd, who long ago set up the framework for how budget reconciliation bills can move through the Senate. And what that means is, since they can only be spending issues, that means some of the policy pieces, things that just change how programs work but don't impact the cost very much, can't be part of the bill. So the Senate parliamentarian is who decides what is germane to the bill and what has to go, and it's going to go through that process. We call that the bird bath because the bird rules. Bird bath is cute. And it's washing away some of the provisions of the bill. But sadly, the things that we care about the most are the cuts, and so those are spending related. They're going to cut Medicaid, cut food stamps. Those things are largely going to will stay in past those rules. So the next piece then is looking at what the senators are saying and holding them accountable if they say they don't want to cut food assistance, if they don't want to cut Medicaid, if they want to give families more cash through the child tax credit, if they care about families being stronger, we need to hold them accountable to that. We also need to explain to senators the harm that it's going to cause to families. That example that I gave of the mom with the 8-year-old who now is going to have to go through extra steps to prove that she deserves to be able to feed her child. Being able to put it in those human terms is really important. The Senate has said that they want to try to pass a bill by July 4th. It is going to be hard for them to meet those deadlines, but they do have a time constraint. And that's because they've attached the debt limit to this process. The debt limit is what you hear about every so often, where Congress has to give the federal government permission to pay our debts. Well, we're reaching up to one of those limits where now Congress is going to need to approve to raise the debt limit so that the US can continue to pay its debts. When you hear about that, you hear about all the catastrophe that could happen if Congress doesn't pass that. So it's a natural forcing mechanism, since they've attached this to the budget reconciliation, to make them keep up this chaotic pace, this passing bills in the dark of night pace, unfortunately may continue as the bill moves to the Senate. But our job is to put it into the light of day, to show in the light of day the horribleness that is included in these bills, the harm that it would cause to families, and therefore the harm that it will cause to the United States as a whole.
Thank you so much for being on, Peggy. Thank you for all you do. Thank you also, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Everybody, follow the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, support the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and make those calls to your U.S. Senator and say, vote no on the big, bad, terrible budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.